All right. Well, Jordan is going to speak today about SIRIL and Affinity Photo. He's been using those for quite a while, actually, and those are things I've been using on and off. But it's great to have someone who has more experience with it than I do. So I'll let you get started, Jordan.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending this little workshop that we had this afternoon. This afternoon, I will be showing you my workflow for processing astronomical photos using SIRIL and Affinity Photo. Early on, I was using DSS, and I really wasn't very satisfied with the results. So I switched to SIRIL. It was a little bit difficult to learn in the beginning, but with the help of the scripts, it made things very, very easy. And the best part is the output. The output was it just looked so much better right out of the bat compared to the DSS. So let me get started. Let me share my screen. Oops, it's disabled.
Sorry about that. I'll get that fixed.
Right.
You should. I'm just going to make you a co-host. You ought to be able to do whatever you need to now.
Okay, let me share my screen. All right. So let's get started with SIRIL. SIRIL is a free application. It's currently in beta, and current version is 0.99.6 and was released September 22nd of last year. So when SIRIL starts, you get this screen, and right beside it, you would see this little console window. And I think they left this out for debugging purposes. I don't normally look at this screen because whatever appears here also appears in the console right here. But it's I think whatever they're doing, they're debugging. So the SIRIL window is composed. By the way, can you guys see my screen?
Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I have it. Sorry.
All right. So if you look, the splash screen says this is an unstable development version. Commit number, I think this is the build number, but the version number is right up here. It's 0.99.6. There are two main areas in the screen. The left area, the large area here, is for the image, and the image is further subdivided into red, green, blue, and a composite RGB. The right side right here has several tabs which are actually used for the actual processing. So you have the conversion tab, the sequence tab, pre-processing, registration, plot, stacking, and console, which just lists the output. I've gone through some of these tabs and it kind of makes sense, but we won't be using this afternoon because it's a little bit difficult to, I guess, pick and choose and run the application through these tabs. So instead of going through these tabs, what we're going to do is we're going to use a script, and we're going to open up a script which is just a text file to see what the script actually does. Now, unlike DSS, SIRIL does not provide a utility for you to copy your darks, your flats, your lights, and biases. All those you have to do manually and with your operating system. So what I normally do is I create a root directory. In this case, I'm calling it the horsehead, since that's what we're going to be processing. And inside, you have to create 3 folders or 4 folders if you have flats, and you have to name them exactly as specified: lights, plural, darks, and biases, and flats if you have them. And I'll explain later on when we open up the script file why it's like that. And again, with the operating system, you would copy your raw images into these directories. SIRIL will not do that for you. There is no utility within SIRIL, so you have to do it with the operating system, through the operating system. Okay, so that's dark and biases. And as I said, I don't have any flats for this particular example. So first step in SIRIL is to click the Home button. Here you would specify your root directory that you created, In this case, I specified horsehead, so I'm going to pick horsehead right here. Click it open. Next, you would pick a script. Now, SIRIL comes with several scripts that are included, and I think all of these pre-processing, exact hydrogen alpha, oxygen 3, mono pre-processing, all these are included, and these I downloaded from a SIRIL site somewhere, I don't recall which, but they did not include anything which only utilized the lights, darks, and bias frames. So I had to modify, I believe, this one to exclude the flats, because I don't have any flats. And if you run it without flats, without that directory, it'll crash. It'll die. It'll say error. So again, going back to this directory, I have lights, darks, and biases. So I'm going to pick the script that would process lights, darks, and biases. So clicking on that starts the ball rolling, and you get the output right here on the console screen. Going back to this directory, you notice that SIRIL has created a process directory, and it sticks all the temporary files in here. Now, here's one thing about SIRIL. It generates a lot of temporary files. So if you have many light frames, it's going to generate a lot of files in here, and it would occupy a lot of disk space. So make sure you have a lot of free disk space if you're processing a lot of files. Okay, so while that's going, let's take a look at how the script file looks like. Okay, so this is the script file. It was written by SIRIL Richard, the developer, I think the main developer for SIRIL. I modified it, and I removed the flats right here. So if you'll notice, it's just a text file. It says CD to biases. That's why you have to call the directory or name the directory biases. Because if you change the directory to bias, it won't find it, it'll crash, it'll stop. Same thing with flats, same thing with darks, and same thing with lights. So you can change these names to whatever you want, and as long as you name your directory, the same as what you have in your script, it should work. So you don't exactly need to name it as, or call it darks if you just want to call it dark without the S, but you just have to make sure that this is dark, not darks. So that's why the directories have to be named as specified. So looking at this script file, you will notice that some functions like convert, and that's the conversion tab right here. Stack is the stacking tab right here. Preprocess is the preprocess tab right here. And register is this tab right here. I don't know what the plot does. I haven't had a chance to play around with it.
Hey, Jordan, let me just
Yes.
go back up to the flats area. So you might want to mention, but the the pound sign is a comment in this file, and that's
Yes.
just that's why that's no. But if I understand correctly, if you put the files in the right places and just run this script, you probably don't ever have to edit the script yourself.
That's correct. That's
do
correct.
everything properly. Okay.
Mm-hmm. The pound sign is a comment, so anything of these like this is just a comment. So I commented out the original, which contained flats. I just commented this section out. So if you use a script file all the time, the same script file, you just have to make sure that when you create your directories, you name them exactly the same, and create a one directory up and just call it whatever DSO that you're trying to image or trying to process. In this case, this is horsehead. All right, so here, let's go back to the console. Let's see what it's doing. It should take about For this 30 stack light frames, maybe about 5 minutes to run. Okay, and this little window here is just a duplicate of whatever's in the console.
So you have, how many lights do you have? It says 54. Is that, no, that's a line.
No, this is 30.
30. Okay. And this is what kind of machine?
I am running an old machine. This is it's a i7, I think, but it's an older i7. It's got plenty of RAM. I think it's got 16 gig of RAM. But for some reason, sometimes it slows down. I mean, it's an old machine. It's been around. I've had this for about 5-6 years now, so it's still decent. But sometimes it slows down for some whatever reason.
That sounds about like mine. Yeah, I stacked your data with the script, and it was around 5 minutes. It wasn't bad at all.
Whoops, I didn't want to do that. All right, let's go to the process directories. If you notice here, SIRIL has created a lot of fit files for each one for the bias frames, for the darks, and each one for the lights. And it does some pre-processing, and again creates more intermediate files. And each one of these is 238 megabytes. So make sure you have a lot of free space on your hard drive. You can delete these after the processing, but during processing, you will have to make sure you have a lot of free space.
Jordan, what size were your original files? Like,
Original files, 23 meg each.
That's a big expansion on file size.
Yeah, this is Roland. A couple of comments. You might be running in 32-bit instead of 16-bit, given that expansion in size. Or maybe it's breaking the raw files down into the individual RGB components.
I'm not sure what it's doing here. It's creating fit files for processing, and my understanding is that once these are done.
Yeah, the other comment is that you can run, if you turn Windows development mode on, it enables symbolic links, and then these will be zero-length symbolic links to the files instead of duplicates. Might actually speed things up too in terms of processing.
That's good to know.
Oh, that's right. So Roland here is another SIRIL expert if you have questions. So.
Yeah, thanks. 1 week of using it.
Thanks. Okay. Roland, when you run it, do you even go into the UI, or are you running it solely from the command line?
No, it's just command line. So yeah, my case is a little more complex, but there's a generator script that another person is working on as part of the SIRIL team that will create a script that's, I guess, think about the script that you just showed us, but you can kind of create one that's customized to your environment. So it can point to a library of master flats, a library of master darks, and that way you don't have to recreate them every time. And you basically use the GUI with this to set up your config files one time. And from that point forward, I've got a Python script that wraps the whole thing, and I just say run, and I never touch the GUI. The entire thing is hands off, and I calibrate the output from 3 scopes running all night in about 10-15 minutes.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
All right, so it's done. It took about 7 minutes, and the output is called result.fit because that's what it's named in the script file. So next thing to do is to open up that file. So let's go open result.fit, and you see a black image. Red, green, blue, and the RGB. Now what we're going to do here is to first stretch it for visual viewing only, display purposes only. This doesn't actually stretch the image.
Can you show how you open that file again? You were really fast and I missed it.
Sorry, it's click on open and just pick the file right here.
Okay.
It's saved on the same, the root directory where we specified from this little home button here.
Okay, thanks.
So click result.fit, click on open, and it's shown right here. So first thing we do is to switch from the linear view. Remember, this one only changes for display. It doesn't actually change or stretch the file. So just to see how it looks like, we say auto stretch. Okay, so this is how the red looks like. The green is going to be very bright. Blue and the RGB would show a lot of green, because from their explanation, this is an RGGB image. There are 2 green channels, something like that. So first thing we have to do is to neutralize the background. So we go into the image processing tab. We pick color calibration. You can either do manual color calibration or photometric. Let's try the photometric. This requires access to the internet. And we're going to specify this as Barnard 33. That's the horse head. Click on find. So when you select this, it puts information for the right ascension and declination in there. You will specify the telescope that you use. I used a Astrotech with a flattener. I believe that reduces it to 380 millimeters. And the pixel size, you can just click on get metadata from image. And my Panasonic is a 3.33. It says it's a 3.32. So I guess we're close enough. I haven't played around with these much, but I wanted to do automatic star detection. So click on OK. So it's processing right here. And you do have this blue bar to tell you how far it's gone. All right, so that's done. Click on close. And that's how the image looks like after adjusting for the background.
Let me just kick in. So this is pretty much doing what photometric color calibration does in PixInsight. If you're familiar with that, it's doing a plate solve and star catalogs. So
okay, so the next step is, if you notice, excuse me, I'm not sure if you guys can see it, but there's still a bit of green noise within the image itself. So you would go in here and say remove green noise. Just stretch the amount maximum and click apply. I mean, it's very subtle, but it does clean up the image quite nicely. Okay, so the green is, there's less green noise in there. Just move this, oops. All right, now remember that the auto stretch we did is for visual purposes only. So this image has not really been stretched yet. So let's go back to linear, and this is one of those quirks in this particular version is I don't understand why we couldn't do it without switching back to linear. I mean, it produces some strange results. So what I noticed is you go back to linear, you go back to this dark image, and go to image processing, histogram transformation, and click on the auto stretch button right here. So it looks exactly the same as when it was here, but this one, of course, you have to click apply, stretches the image itself, not just for viewing. So don't forget to click apply. I clicked close many times and it went back to being unstretched. So click apply and then click close. So that's our image. Let's switch back to the blue, green, and the red channels. And those are the components. Back to RGB. Next thing I do is to darken the background. And to do that, I go to the A sin H transformation. Okay, Okay, I'm going to stretch the black point. I think that looks good. Click apply. All right. Next step is to crop, because I believe I do have some, what do you call this? Stacking artifacts. When I imaged this, I made a mistake. I actually moved the scope. That's why you get this big band right here. So some of the images were offset. So I want to crop this image. If you notice here, we're on the RGB tab, and when you click on that, it's going to tell you only for visualization. It's one of those things that I don't understand why you couldn't do it in the RGB. The crop, instead, you go into one of these other channels and just use the mouse button to drag a frame. Of course, you can adjust it, and then right-click and say crop. It's going to complain. It's going to tell you, hey, we did some astrometric solution detected. Remember the photometric calibration. If you do this, you're going to lose it. It's okay. So you can just click OK, and it'll crop it. Drag it here. Okay, so back to RGB. So other things, some people would stop here, export it, and go to Affinity Photo or Photoshop to process. But you can do other things to improve the image. You can go to saturate the color. Okay, so you got saturated color right there. You can also go do something called contrast limited adaptive histogram equalization. And I think what this does is, when you do a histogram, it does for the entire image. What this does is, I think it does it by area. So this tile's grid size, you have to play with this, how big the tile's going to be. It doesn't show it really. And what the clip limit is. It's kind of good, but you have to play with it. So let's see what happens when we erase this. Okay, so again, you tweak it to taste. For me, that looks good. I'm going to click apply. And if I wanted to background to darken a little bit more, I go back to A-Sin H transformation. And to me, that looks good enough to move to Affinity Photo to process. So before we move to Affinity Photo, are there any questions at this point?
Yeah, does this have any sort of concept of undo? Can you back up if you make a mistake?
Yes, you can do a Control Z. I'm not sure how many steps though. For instance, this one you do Control Z. It did that. It undid the A-Sin H transformation.
Okay.
There's a little back arrow thing up next to the home button. You can go backwards and forwards, I think, just like in PixInsight.
This one?
Okay, cool.
The little, yeah, you see where the home is, where you chose the working directory?
Oh, this one.
Yeah, I think those are undo and redo.
That's it.
Hey, Jordan, this is Don Duhart.
It's done.
How is this better than Deep Sky Stacker in regard to image quality? Or
The output is just, there's so much less to play around with the output. It just came out very well to begin with, so there's less work on the side of Affinity Photo. With Deep Sky Stacker, the same image, M31, I was processing it, and it took me so much more work to do. Maybe I'm not doing something right in DSS, but when I ran this against Deep Sky Stacker, M31, it just came in very well. And I was very amazed. I said, wow, what did I do different? And the only thing that was different was stacking process.
Okay.
So I stopped using DSS and I'm using SIRIL now.
I had a question, Jordan.
Yes.
Have you tried using the light pollution gradient tool?
In here?
Yeah, I played with it a little. I was just curious if you'd the background extraction.
Yeah, I did do that. Let's try that. What you would do here is you would specify how many samples per line and have it generate. So you want to make it a little smaller maybe. And what you would do is to make sure that none of these green dots or squares, sorry, you have to switch to one of these other windows. None of these green squares fall on your image that you want to keep. So you have to right click using the mouse to get rid of that.
You don't have to go through the whole thing right now. I was just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I tried this and I still have to play with it.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I think we can undo this if we don't like it. So let's see.
Yeah, this is interesting for me to watch. Even the comments in the console going by are almost like exactly what you see in PixInsight when it's running. And the ordering of the tools are identical. So I guess the function is, after all, the same. But I wonder if the developers used to be PixInsight developers.
It's possible.
Yeah.
So
I think they're just looking very closely at PixInsight.
yeah,
They have a generate a dynamic PSF function, and
Yeah.
it looks, the screen for that looks the same as PixInsight.
Yeah, I guess they thought PixInsight was expensive, so they
Yeah.
built something that was very inexpensive. It's free. Anyway, so let me try this. Again, I had not played around with it much. Apply. Kind of, sort of. I mean,
you might want to drop that degree from 4 to maybe 2 up there at the top. Yeah, that 4 is pretty. Yeah, you might. I usually would use 2 or 1 there. It's like ABE and PixInsight, but anyway, I don't want to sidetrack your talk. I just thought it'd be good to show people that there's a pretty capable tool in here also.
right. I mean, there are other functions in here which I have not even touched. What's it? You have median filter, rotational gradient, deconvolution. A lot of these I haven't touched.
Yeah, that RGB compositing at the bottom, I think you could combine SHO with if you're doing narrowband imaging. So
Right.
some neat things in here.
Okay. So anyway, where were we? Okay, let me just undo this. All right.
One thing I think that's kind of interesting is they do the deconvolution near the end instead of in the linear state, only on the L. At least in the tutorials that I've seen, that's where they do the decon step as well, which is just different from PI's approach.
All right. So here, what we could do is right-click and say Save to TIFF. Give it a name. R33. Save. And that's it. So that's where I end with the SIRIL portion. So let's start up Affinity Photo. So before we switch over to Affinity Photo, are there any other questions for SIRIL? Because I'm going to have to close it due to processor. I think it might be hogging up some memory or a processor. All right, so let's.
I think we're good. Thanks.
All right, so let's exit. By the way, if you notice here, there's a command line window. So anything you click here can actually be executed here in the command line. So here, instead of just clicking exit, you can say quick, whoops, exit, and it exits. All right, so Affinity Photo. So what we're going to pull in is the TIFF file that we created. So it's v33.tiff. I normally would make a copy, a duplicate of the background just in case I make a mistake. So I make a copy. I could make some changes here. If I think it's a little bit too dark, I go to curves. And I want to brighten up the background reds. I use the picker. And darken the blacks. So that's the after, that's before, that's after. Curves is very powerful. I like using curves. So what else here? I want to darken the background a little bit, so I go into levels. And I could play around either a bit with the black level or with the gamma slider here. Okay. Let's add some saturation to the colors. I go into vibrance. Vibrance will bring out those very subtle hues more compared to saturation. Saturation is just gonna crank everything up, which we don't want. So maybe just a little bit of saturation and boost the vibrance. All right, so at this point, our image is looking good, but it's very noisy because of all the stretching that introduces noise. So what I normally do is I merge visible. So this pixel here, this pixel layer includes everything down here. I'm going to rename this to noise reduction. Go into filters, denoise. And I'll click the mirror view so we can see the before and after. So there's a lot of color noise here. So we boost the slider here for the colors. We don't want to overdo it though. And let's see if we can drop it a bit. And this is a matter of personal choice. I think this is still okay. And maybe drop the luminance a little bit. Luminance nice. Remember, every time you denoise, you lose some sharpness, so you kind of have to have that trade-off. I think this looks pretty good.
Jordan, before you leave that, could you explain each slider just briefly?
Okay, I will try.
Yeah.
Luminance is the brightness of the image, the noise that you're trying to, you know what, before we do that, let's create, let's delete this thing because it's already applied and you cannot unapply it. Let's create another level, say NR. And this is where my Affinity Photo seems to slow down on my machine when I'm doing noise reduction. I don't know, maybe it's using a lot of processor power, I'm not sure. But anyway, so we go into noise and denoise. So luminance is the brightness of the image. If we cut this, you will see the image noise come out, not just the color. Color is over here. What the luminance detail, my understanding here is how much detail do you want to preserve? Because as I mentioned earlier, if you boost this thing all the way up, you'll notice everything turns like watercolor. It reminds me of some Sony cameras earlier when they did noise reduction. It just turned out like watercolors. So too much luminance noise reduction will create a very soft image, and this luminance detail is supposed to help you hold the detail in. But you know, if it's too much, there's really nothing that this can do. And I'm not sure contribution. I usually just put 100%. I think this is just a way of making to lower how much the luminance denoising is affected. And it's the same thing with color. For color, it's chroma noise. So these are color noise right here. This, all right, let me just drop the luminance noise a little bit. Let me just drop it right here. So if you notice the color noise is still present. Let's drop the color. Okay, so this is your color noise, chroma, right here. Luminance is just brightness. So if you want to get rid of the color noise, you increase the color slider right here. Just leave color contribution to 100%. This is more like, I think these are almost the same thing, but it's a bit of more of a fine tuning. So you can see 44%, apply 100% of 44%, something like that. That's what I found it to do. So if you don't like that, because sometimes it takes away from the color of the image if you do too much. Like this, if you notice the reds are almost gone here. So you don't want to do too much. So you kind of drop it back down to where it's just, again, according to taste, how much you would like to soften the image or sharpen the image or remove the noise. It's really up to you. For me, this, I think this is not bad. I mean, if you were printing this image 40 by 60, you probably would have to crank up the luminance noise here, slider. But if it's small, it's okay. I mean, again, it's up to you. Just play around with this.
So to paraphrase kind of what you're saying, the luminance and the color sliders are the ones you mainly find have the biggest effect when you're trying to clean up an image?
Yes, the luminance and color sliders. I usually leave the luminance contribution and color contribution to 100%. Photoshop, I don't think has these two. And to be honest, I don't see what's the use of this because you have this.
Right.
It's
okay.
more of a secondary control to the luminance slider here. It's almost as if, hey, I'm applying 32%, but I want you to apply 100% of 32%. I'm not sure why they have an extra slider here. I've never played with this slider before.
I wonder
Maybe
if
it's
that's
fine.
similar, and I wonder if that's similar to Photoshop's like blending percentage or something like that.
I couldn't figure it out. I didn't ever read about it, but I found the same thing as Jordan. I could get a good result just adjusting luminance and colors and maybe, you know, tweaking the luminance detail depending on how much it was interfering with things I didn't want it to. But I think those three sliders give you a lot of free control.
Yeah. So anyway, let's cancel this and let's take a look at a different way of doing noise reduction, not by using filters, but by using a live layer. So we're going to do a live filter layer. This is the same thing, but my understanding is this is not as strong as the one that's directly applied to the pixel layer. So you have the same sliders and you have an extra control called opacity. Again, this is going to affect how much of the noise reduction is applied to the image. So if you notice here, we have no color reduction, no color noise reduction, no luminance noise reduction. It's very noisy. I'm going to get rid of the color noise. So let me increase that. So I don't know if you can see it, but the color noise has already started to decrease.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious.
And luminance noise, I'm going to add some luminance noise reduction. And as I said, this is not as strong as the one you would do from a direct filter. And this opacity allows you to tweak. Let's just apply this. This is already applied. So this has noise reduction. This has no noise reduction. So noise reduction, and you can tweak the opacity. Again, this will say how much of this noise reduction do you want to get applied. You can lower it. You get a bit more noise, but more detail. I don't know if this is similar to what Photoshop has, but if you apply noise reduction using one of these live filter layers, right here, you can turn it on and off. If you use this filter, it's applied directly and you can't change it. Once it's in, it's in. So those are two ways of applying the noise reduction.
Yeah, the traditional way to do that would be to apply it to your NR level
Correct.
layer.
Right.
And then if you click on that layer, God, I keep saying that, you'll see it has an opacity slider also up there, right at two lines up.
Oh, this one right here.
No. Well, the one that says opacity, go up like, down, right there.
This one right here.
Yeah, you could use, if you applied it to that level and then use that opacity, you could control it. But the thing about a live level is it's not destructive, right? You could go back in there and change the settings if
That's
you double click.
It's destructive. Correct.
Right.
You can also change the blend mode. You can play around with these.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's, like a lot of these programs, there's more than one way to do things. It depends on how your personal workflow, I guess.
Right. So after applying noise reduction, you know what? I'm going to do the live one. I'm just going to delete this. And I'm going to apply noise reduction because normally after I flatten the image, I'm done here making these changes to the levels, the colors, the white balance maybe. So the last thing I would do is noise reduction and maybe some sharpening. So I'm going to go back to filters, denoise, there. Apply this one down when it does this. I'm not sure why. And I create another layer, create a duplicate. And I'm going to name this sharpen. Now, there are several ways to sharpen. You go into filters, sharpen. You can either add some clarity, or you can use an unsharp mask or a high pass filter. Different folks will pick different combinations maybe, or sometimes just do the high pass, or unsharp mask is definitely the most popular. Now, radius would control, I guess, the pixel size where it applies the unsharp mask. Factor, I am not sure. And threshold, I guess, controls the neighboring pixels of how much it would include or something like that. That's what I've read. So too much sharpening would introduce back noise. So you kind of have to play around with these numbers and see what you think. I mean, I'm looking at this star right now here compared to this star. These look sharper, definitely. Yeah, like this one right here, it's a bit blurry. This one is much more defined. And click apply. And there you have your image. Sometimes I would do star reduction. I think we can attempt to do that here. Do we have time?
Oh yeah, please.
All right, I'm going to try, and this is a bit funky because I had it working at one point, but it's a little strange. But let's see. The way I do star reduction, I would go into select sampled colors, and I would reduce the tolerance, and I would pick a star. All right, so if you, I don't know if you guys can see it, but if you notice, it has picked objects of the similar color that you selected. See, that's shimmering right there.
Mm-hmm.
So click apply, and you would increase your selection. Grow, shrink, I usually increase it maybe 2 pixels, and I say circular since it's a star. Apply. then I would feather it half the size of it, maybe 1 pixel, and click apply. Now the important thing to know here is that you have to make sure that none of these selections are going to be included with the nebula that you have here, because it's going to affect it. So sometimes if you make a selection and it seems to select your nebula because apparently it's the same color, you're going to have to play around with the selection brush here to unselect the nebula. So here goes the magic. I'm not sure if this will work, but let's try. It's blur, and go to minimum blur. And this is, I think, a bug in Affinity Photo for this particular function. It doesn't seem to mirror exactly the change here when you do the radius. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So I'm just gonna go radius 19.1 and click apply and see how that looks. Okay, I'm gonna deselect. Well, that looks ugly, but you know, you get the idea.
I think, yeah, you might try that with a smaller radius.
Right, maybe the radius was
Leave
too much.
a little star behind. The other thing I found was if you go under select and there's a tonal ranges, I think, or yeah, is it tonal range? The highlights.
Right.
Sometimes that will select some of the nebula maybe, but it seemed to be more color agnostic, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Looking
I
for
haven't
stars.
tried that.
But it's the same idea as what you're doing, essentially. Yeah. Well, that's a good. That's one of the things I liked about Affinity was that circular minimum filter. It gives a cleaner result, I think, than the minimum filter in my old version of Photoshop, which is kind of square based, I guess is the way I would explain it.
Right. This one you can select circular.
Exactly.
So we took up too many stars, so I'm just going to undo it. This is bad. So I'm going to undo it. Anyway, that was minimizing the star size. And here you could save it. Save as an Affinity Photo project. And extension is AF Photo.
We're doing fine on time, Jordan. So don't just do what you want to do.
Okay.
So how would you export that for like Astrobin?
Here you would say File, Export. You would pick whatever file type you want.
Let's say PNG.
DNG.
I'm sorry, the first one. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
DNG.
And one thing I did here, if you go under more at the bottom, there's make sure you embed that ICC profile, that checkbox that you have right there.
Right.
Yep. And then it'll display right on the web. So yeah, it's pretty slick.
What I noticed at Affinity that when it exports and if it's 100%, I don't know why their files are big. Like this one is 66 megabytes. So if you're sending it to somebody, make sure you, when you export, you reduce, well, not with PNG, but I know JPEG, you can reduce the quality to reduce the size. But, you know, it has many export types. I haven't played around with most of them. I just primarily been doing TIFF, JPEG. I don't know why it has PDF. Why would you want to do PDF?
At the top of the program there, it says RGBA 32. I don't know if you have it set to 32 bits per pixel or not. Maybe that's why they're so big. I'm not sure. At the very top of the program, near the menus.
Sorry, what was that?
At the top of the program where it says underneath your menus, you've got the size of the image, then megapixels. It says RGBA/32. I wonder if you have 32 bits per pixel set. Maybe if you lowered it to 8, it would make the export much smaller.
Oh, quite possibly, yeah. I believe you changed that to the document, and you maybe want to resize the canvas or resize the document. You could do that too.
Yeah, PNG is defined to be 8-bit, so I don't know what's
Oh, okay. Well, then never mind.
But no, but you know, you can see it certainly supports about any type of file you would want to create, which is nice. And if you wanted to
PNG.
oh, there you go. Yeah.
8. Let's try that. I'm not sure what it's doing.
The dithering must be an expensive operation.
Probably, yeah.
If you could, yeah, maybe you can cancel that, but yeah, we get the idea there. Could you just show quickly, how would you resize? Let's say, this image is huge, right? It's like 4 by 3K. How would you resize it? Maybe if you want to upload a smaller version.
Well, if I were to export, I would do it in the export, because when you resize the document, I think you lose some resolution right off the bat.
Okay.
So I would do it. And again, if your machine is not as fast, and that's what's recommended, is to resize the document, make it a little smaller, or change the DPI.
Okay, so you can just type in whatever and lock it, and it'll scale it and keep the aspect ratio. Okay, and then the other thing would be, could you just show quickly how you would crop? Let's say you use a different program and you didn't crop it before you got here.
Yeah, cropping is right here. There's a crop tool, and you can say unconstrained, meaning to say there's no fixed aspect ratio, or you can say, all right, I want to make sure you have the original ratio. You can do that too.
Let's get some nice thirds markers there for you.
And then click on apply. And if you want to uncrop, you go back to the document and you say unclip canvas. And I don't know why they call it unclip canvas. The developers of Affinity Photo I think are British, I think. Because, yeah, I think it's British. So maybe they use clip unclip. We use crop uncrop. But it's unclip canvas to do that. So that's...
All right, that's great. To see this kind of workflow in person, I think if I'd seen this before I started trying to figure out all this myself, it would have been easier. I know just knowing I could use a script instead of the UI in SIRIL makes it a little more approachable for me, at least. But do you have any questions for Jordan?
I have no questions other than to thank him for showing this to me. This to me is very helpful. Like, I just got Affinity on the $25 deal this week, and just seeing how the layers work and where menus and where things are, and the general language it speaks, really helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Let me just show you what I did. Mike, remember I told you about the Rosette Nebula that I wasn't able to get the reds out?
Right.
I reprocessed. Oops, this is the wrong one. That was the one that I couldn't get the reds out, and I reprocessed it. Still the wrong one. Third one. Let's see. Let's try this one.
Oh, wow.
I was able to get the reds out. So here, duplicate layer. And I'm going to boost the reds. Picker. Push those reds up.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's working.
And I'm going to drop the background.
So what he's doing is if you click on Picker and you click on a part of the image and start dragging up or down, you'll see it added 2 points to the curves there. And it'll add a point at the matching brightness. And that gives you good control over contrast instead of guessing how bright a pixel is.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's really nice.
Yeah, that's Yeah, I like that.
Does Photoshop do that the same way? Can you just click on the image and drag down and up?
I think you control click on a pixel and it adds a point, and then you go grab the point and drag it around.
Okay, cool.
That's an example of, I have muscle memory to do that. So I started doing that here, and then I clicked on picker and started clicking, expecting it to do something, and it didn't. And then I watched a video where someone started going, oh, it's a gesture. You have to do a gesture to get something to happen. And it's pretty slick once you've picked it up.
I mean, it's a very nice application for $25. This is really a steal. Hello. And again, my computer's acting up. Let's see, HSL. Let's say we want to boost the reds. You click on that. You want to saturate the reds. There you go.
Right. I was saying, these are things that usually you need Photoshop to do, and they work very well for, I mean, much better than you expect in a $25 program for sure. But
Yep. And so I was telling Mike the other day, I can't believe how many stars are in this area of the sky. When you look at it, it's nothing. It's just unbelievable amount of stars. Wow.
how much exposure time is this?
This was 200 frames of 30 seconds each. So that's,
Okay.
how long is that?
100 minutes, right?
100 minutes, yeah, 100 minutes, an hour and a half, a little bit over an hour and a half.
And what
Yeah.
kind of camera are you using?
It's a Panasonic G9.
Is
And I'm
it
using,
is it modified or?
No, it's unmodified.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a really good result.
Right, before that, I was not able to get the reds out. So I reprocessed it in SIRIL and I used the photometric calibration. And it worked much, much better. And I was very surprised. So this was the first try, same data set, and I couldn't get much out of it. Let's see, I got lots of the blues, but not the reds. Yeah, so there you have it. I mean, this is, I think, pretty good.
Does Affinity have masks that are, variable, where the brighter the mask, the more it gets applied, just like Photoshop?
Yes, it does have masks. For instance, let's go back to our, like this one. Let's say, for instance, I'm going to uncheck these. So I could say, all right, I'm going to define my mask. I'm just going to pick my nebula.
So what he's using is called a selection brush, and it's kind of like a brush you would paint pixels, but with it you paint the selection you want.
Right, so right here. And I'm going to add that to the curves. I'm going to add a mask there. So if you notice, I'm going to deselect. Of course, it looks unnatural, but I'm just showing that the mask is possible. So this curve is only applied to this area right here.
Okay.
Of course, it looks weird. So let's maybe lower the opacity there. But yes, you do have masks. And masks are very similar to Photoshop.
Can you alt click on that mask?
Yes, you can alt
There's a
click on
show.
it.
So, and it's not just black and white. It is the gray. It's an alpha channel, like you would
Yeah,
have.
that's what I was asking. Is it just
Yeah.
black and white, or is there shades of gray? For the,
So the only thing, and I've talked about this, the only thing different is, like, let's say you wanted to do something to this. Like when I have one that's like a gradient, I like to go in there and hit Control M, which is curves in Photoshop, and then apply curves to the mask. You can't do that, as far as I can tell, in Affinity, but you can put an adjustment layer that modifies the mask to do something similar. It gets a little, to me, the children layers get a little confusing, but like if you made an adjustment, Jordan, a new adjustment layer with the half moon down there at the bottom.
This one?
Yeah. And you just do curves and just close. Yeah. And then close it. Yeah. So right now it's applying to the, hang on. I'm sorry. I'll slow down. Change that to say, instead of master, say alpha down at the, see, this is what you have to do. You have to change that to alpha, and then it's affecting the mask layer. So it's a little quirky. But once you figure it out, I think it's similar.
I have not tried that yet, but that's probably something good to try.
Yeah, yeah. It's I'm going to spend about another week, and I'll do a workshop on some of this. If you know Photoshop, how do you use Affinity workshop? Because
Yeah, that'd be nice.
I'm keeping a document of everything I'm learning.
Cool.
But very good. Yeah, if anyone obviously has bought Affinity this week and has questions, please choose either. You can put it on imaging or the beginner list, and we'll both be watching. And hopefully we can all start learning how to use this together.
Yep, if there are no questions, then thank you very much, guys, for sharing the afternoon here.
Oh, thanks for
Thank
the
you, Jordan.
presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Really good presentation.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I
Jordan.
enjoyed it a whole lot.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks, Jordan. I appreciate it. And
Thank you.
everyone have a good Saturday. And if you want, at 8 p.m., I'm going to be showing off Nina tonight. I'll post about it on the list later.
Cool.
All right.
All right.
See you later.
Thank you, guys.
See you
Have a
later.
good day. Bye.
Thanks, Michael.